Hello, welcome to HRA Geopolitics. Today, I have a very important guest. Thank you joining me, Ken.
Thank you very much
Today,
for having me.
thank you. Ken is working for many years as an analyst and journalist and is very close to the US politics, writing very important analysis. I'm following you for many years, I must say, and getting insightful information. So we are very close to the US elections, and there are many challenges, not only regarding of the internal politics of the United States, but also the challenges in foreign policy. And there are divided minds outside of the United States how the superpower will continue, especially regarding so many problems, be it the Ukraine crisis or the Israel-Palestine conflict, especially the tensions also in China-Taiwan. So it's very great to have you here, especially a person who is very well experienced also in the Asia-Pacific conflict between China and the United States and the Taiwan issue, also the perspective on Japanese foreign policy. So I think we will cover some of these subjects, and I hope I will learn something new like every time when I'm listening to you or reading your articles in Nikkei Asia. And also my followers will get some insightful and fruitful information. Thank you joining us. My first questions in that regard, Ken, would be how you read all the challenges, especially I don't remember in the last decades any election, especially so fired like right now between the Harris campaign and Trump, especially the assassination attempt, going against Trump and all the discussions and the court going against him, against Trump. And on the other hand, Harris, someone we know maybe as a vice president, but don't know much how she will, rule the country if she is elected, and how her view is different than the Biden administration, especially regarding the geopolitics. If you would sum up the last months, what is going on in the United States internal politics, and how would you see the challenges, especially on both sides, be it Harris when she wins the elections in foreign policy or the Trump side? How you read that? That would be my first question, especially.
Yeah, it's a fascinating election to watch. My first reaction to your question would be to say that I think everybody is trying to reflect their inner feelings when they see the candidate with wishful thinking. So some extreme right people who are supporting Trump hopes that he disrupts the whole entire establishment and recreates politics in a way that would change America forever. That's probably not going to happen. Yesterday, I was at American University for a conference about climate change and why climate change was not an issue in the election. And they're all Harris supporters. And the discussion there was like, well, Harris has flip-flopped on fracking, and she's taking a more moderate stance on climate change, but she will probably come back to the progressive left when she is elected. And that's probably not going to happen either. So there is so much wide division in America, but whichever side is elected, I don't think it'll be such a drastic change, even if it's President Trump, because I think his focus in the second term, if he is elected, would be to go down in history as a good president. If you listen to the way he speaks at speeches now, he's very proud of his first term. He had secure borders. He didn't start any wars. There was no inflation, and the economy was much better. So he's very proud of that. I think he would want to have a second term in which he can continue to talk like that. He doesn't want to be remembered as somebody who destroyed democracy in America or was a terrible person who we never want to see again. I don't think that's what he wants. So I'm pretty confident that he will govern in a way that will be remembered favorably. He wants that. And I think it's the same for Kamala Harris too. I don't think she will go extreme left to progressive policies. And we can talk about geopolitics later.
Yeah. When I'm looking at the United States politics in general, of course, we are more well experienced in that and following the country very closely for many years. When I'm looking, I was born and grew up in Europe, so especially Germany. We have a different attitude, especially regarding politics, but more and more, even the European politics getting divided, and we are seeing that the center of the politics, especially be it the center right or center left, going more and more to the corner side of the politics, like what we would describe more populist speeches, more extreme demands and promises what is made. And I think that is also a bit from United States politics, influence, especially in the Western world. Like sometimes I'm thinking it's like a copy paste, in a small version. So, but like you said, if any of them coming to the charge, especially the grand, promises what they made, when you look, do you think it is, that they connected somehow with the American bureaucracy, what is actually running the state, and can push these ideas, or you are thinking more, no, that's just a campaign, especially to get the last voters on the boat. But when they are in charge, because the vision right now in the world is like when Trump is, they are expecting like extreme decision, like to just cut off the help to Ukraine, for example. And on the other hand, there was this campaign in the previous election, especially Biden was telling now we are going back to the institutional, democracy and connecting again to the global world and repairing everything what Trump has, destroyed. But I'm not agreeing much. Like you explained the same, many things was actually good during Trump time in that sense. So do you think it is just a show right now, what we are watching with all the speeches and, promises what they made, and as soon as they are getting elected, everything will be normal and they will follow actually the advices of the bureaucrats and the, advisors, or we will see some heavy changes, be it in internal USA and the foreign policy?
Right. So I think what is really interesting is not necessarily what the next administration will do, but how the defeat of the presidential election will impact the losing party. So if Trump wins, there'll be a bloody battle in the Democratic Party about the future of the Democratic Party. There'll be the progressive left, and there'll be the moderates, and they will, in the next 4 years, they will come to some kind of direction. And I say this because what you see in the Biden administration is a reaction to the Trump 4 years. And they saw what Trump did, and they, as you say, they wanted to institutionalize and stabilize America's path, but they also acknowledged that there is so much frustration in the American public towards globalization and the state of trade and losing jobs to foreign countries. So as a reaction to the Trump phenomenon, the Biden team has taken drastic steps, some steps which I would say are much more drastic than what the Trump administration did, in that it is these industrial policies that they spend billions of dollars of government money to shore up some semiconductor sectors. That would never have happened if there wasn't a Trump administration. So we are moving away from globalization to a very much government-sponsored like architecture path of the economy, which is very, very interesting, very different change. So it's, to answer your question, I don't think the change that will come is just immediate, but will have long-term consequences. So if Trump loses, there will be a soul searching in the Republican Party, and that will be very interesting too.
Mm-hmm. When I look again to the past, you have most probably also followed many elections from the United States. From my personal point of view, I have this, I have the thought that the United States is no more producing the leadership what we know from the past, especially in important decision making. Do you think it has something to do with the personal quality of the campaigners right now, or is it just because the United States have no more the power or maybe the breadth like in the past to solve all of the international issues? What from this both, you are tending more? Because I'm thinking sometimes, yes, Trump and Kamala Harris, there are so many fans of them and also voter groups. But when I look to the past, there were more, how should I describe, more intellectual depth in understanding the world. Right now, it is more about the several internal aspects what they are campaigning, and it's more the getting the last people on board with sometimes populist promises. But when I compare, for example, the 90s, there were presidents like Bill Clinton. You can criticize him in some aspects, but they had more understanding of the world. Right now, the critique from outside of the USA, also my country like Turkey, when they're looking to the candidates, they're thinking like, okay, is that the two person who should be running actually for the Democrats and the Republicans? How is the view in the United States on both parties? Do they think they both are the best qualified people, or they have no other options, instead of them?
So when we talk about the leadership role of the US, the US in terms of budget, defense budget, they have the capability to continue to be the dominant superpower of the world and be the world's policeman. The problem is that because after the Cold War, in the years of Clinton and the administrations that followed, they just shrank the defense industry in the hope that there would be a more peaceful world and that America wouldn't need to spend so much of its budget on defense, and that they can invest in education and the society, and people will have better lives. And that was a very honorable goal, but that wasn't the reality of the world. And because in terms of shipyards, for instance, there used to be 13 public shipyards, now there's 4. Just the ability to keep up with China's industrial power is just not there. And that means that if America is fully supporting Ukraine and fully supporting Israel, it just cannot support Taiwan. It's just a zero-sum game. You'd like them to do everything, but they can't. So they're very actively trying to tap allies like Japan and South Korea and Australia to share their defense industry capability to fill up what is lacking. That's going to take time. So whoever the leader is, I don't think Harris or Trump will be able to. I know they cannot increase the defense industrial base immediately. So it will be a matter of managing. And I think there will be a certain amount of prioritization, which goes first, which goes second. If they put Israel first, which I think they will, and Israel goes to war with Iran, then they would have to be coupled with diplomacy with China, with an eye on Chinese power peaking in 2027, 2028, and understanding that Xi Jinping would want to do something on Taiwan. How do you manage that? How do you convince him not to do that, but not go into war either? So who handles this limited resources does matter, but I don't think either candidate is in a position to drastically increase American national power. And it's very interesting when you talk to Chinese diplomats in this town, they value American presence on the sole basis of whether they increase national power or they weaken national power. So they think Ronald Reagan was a good president because he made America strong. They think Bill Clinton was a good president because the economy was good. under him. They think Donald Trump was a good president because the American economy was good under him. They think Obama, Bush, and Biden are very bad presidents. That's what they think. Very interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Maybe it is also sometimes from a personal view, a romantic view to the past or nostalgia. It could be. But just that caught my attention, and I wanted to know also your opinion about. So when we come back, maybe the results after the election, when we talk, for example, when I'm looking to many polls, they are telling, Trump is ahead, but you're never sure in US elections. We must wait. But the probability when Trump is elected, do you think the famous isolation politics to that time, what he has advocated, especially the tariff wars with China, with the European Union, especially with Germany, I remember to that time, will that continue and start again? Or do you think Trump will have a different approach in handling all of these challenges, especially with China? Do they have any plan? When I'm looking to his new team, I'm not so much sure, because his previous team was a different approach. The new team, of course, I have heard some speeches of them, but I'm still not sure what they actually want to adapt in this China tension and the whole struggle with the Chinese expansionism, etc. So how do you think the tariff wars will start, or do you see any possibility in near future, maybe for the hot engagement, especially in Pacific with the United States and China?
So I think there's three things I would like to say. On the last point of the hot conflict, if you read the biography of Shinzo Abe, which was published after his death, it was a series of interviews, 18 interviews he gave with Japanese journalists. In that book, he talks about how he, after many engagements with Donald Trump, he came to the conclusion that Donald Trump doesn't like war. He thinks war is a bad idea. He thinks it costs a lot of money and there's nothing to gain. So in the lead up to the engagement with North Korea, Trump's engagement with Kim Jong-un, Abe writes that it was crucial to hide from Kim Jong-un the fact that Trump would never go to war. Because if Kim Jong-un knew that secret, then he would be able to manipulate the negotiations in that way. So he and Bolton and the NSC staff were tag teaming to make sure that this big secret would never be known by the opposite side. So that's one. We were talking about what were we talking about again? The question. I'm sorry. Can we go back?
Possibility about maybe a hot engagement, but you put it very well, especially also with Shinzo Abe, how he talked about what Trump is actually thinking. But in his second term, the question is arising maybe because we read it like that the Trump administration would be more harsh against China than against Russia.
Sorry.
Is there any possibility that Trump starts again these tariff wars, like the economic wars during his time, or maybe a hot conflict possibility? That was my question.
I'm sorry about that. I blanked. So I think it would be wrong to try to draw a conclusion from the speeches of Robert O'Brien or Elbridge Colby. We don't know, because Trump is the ultimate decider. I think there are a few takeaways from the first administration that we are absolutely positive of, and that's that he doesn't like free riders. So you can be sure that he will look around the world and look at the map and see who's the free rider, and then he will go very hard on that free rider, that's for sure. Germany has changed since the Merkel years, so there may be differences there. Also, the third point is I think that we should do away with our diplomatic foreign affairs textbooks, because he's not very orthodox. He will approach each issue with a fresh set of eyes, and the things he says may sound bombastic, but if you sit down and think about it, it might not be that bombastic. For instance, I have an example. Susan Glazer of the New Yorker said that 1 year after Trump lost the 2020 election, she and her husband, Peter Baker, went to Mar-a-Lago to interview Donald Trump. And in that interview, they asked, if you had a second term, what do you want to do? And the first answer that he said was, I want to reduce US troops in South Korea. And Susan was like, is that the first thing that popped into your mind? But if you think about why he wants to reduce American troops in South Korea, it could be that he's really thinking of resuming talks with Kim Jong-un. And last time he really didn't have something to offer, so the Hanoi talks broke down. But maybe he's thinking that, okay, so the US troops are there because there is a North Korean threat. If there is no North Korean threat, then I don't need US troops there. So if that's the outcome anyway, why don't I reduce the South Korean troops and give a path for Kim Jong-un to say yes to? And then if Kim Jong-un agrees to denuclearize, then they would reduce the US troops anyway. So maybe that's his way of trying to make a breakthrough from North Korea. So if we look at it from the lens of how we see it, it sounds like very scary, the fact that he would want to reduce US troops from South Korea. But I don't know, I've never talked to him, but that might be his thinking.
Yes, but exactly this example is what makes most probably in Europe and some other nations the political leadership, or sometimes also the population, very anxious about a Trump administration. Because I remember when he came to the charge in 2016, the talk was like taking out the nukes from Europe, and Europe should protect itself. So now, after so many years of efforts, especially also in Asia Pacific with AUKUS and all the allies in that area to challenge maybe the Chinese issue, but then on other side saying, okay, we want to deconflicting with North Korea, so we take out the troops. So that is actually the approach from Trump, what we know from his previous time. He tried actually many steps, but it was not successful like expected. So do you mean he will continue and go farther this time, or just adapt himself to the American way of security understanding from his advisors or the bureaucracy?
Yes, so I think if I put myself in his shoes, I think he's thinking that the failures of the first administration were due to his advisors. He had the wrong advisors. For instance, John Bolton, his national security advisor, was very much opposed to any dealings with North Korea. So this time he'll find a national security advisor who's more loyal to him. So I think he'll push it on the areas that his instinct tells him that there is room for breakthrough. But of course, that would be within the context that he wants to be remembered as a good president. But as long as he thinks that the outcome would be within those parameters, I think he will pursue it.
So I have sometimes the feeling Trump wants to be remembered, especially in at least one international affair, as the solving person. But in previous term it was not possible. But of course there are also the risks. For example, the mistakes what the Democratic administration during 2011, 2015 made in the Middle East with Iran, the GCPOA agreements, etc. And many people understand today when they look back and saying, no, that was a bad decision. And that actually encouraged, more the Iranians to going forward with their program. I hope that the same issue is not happening with North Korea, because sometimes the good approach or the goodwill of some person can be understood as also a weakness in geopolitics. You're never sure. So that is most probably also the question mark in the minds of many people. So when we come back to the Pacific issue, I remember during the time of Abe, there was, of course, a very close relations, like always, with Japan and the United States. But at the same time, there was also an approach of an independent policy, also from the Japanese perspective, especially the nationalists. So did that change with time? Are they more going into the American camp, especially in engaging China in that sense, or they want to be more self-reliable and maybe also going, independent way? Because that is also, when we look from outside, Japanese had always, a close relation with the United States and was also conform with the United States foreign policy. But during Abe time, there was much talk. I have read also in Japanese newspapers and journalists saying, okay, Abe is trying also a bit, to revive old Japanese view, the nationalist view, going some ways also on its own, and maybe not too much, the reliance on the United States. How do you see the Japanese-United States engagement in that, be it the engagements with China or the relation in general?
So Abe's relationship with China is very interesting. This also from his memoir, is that his strategy towards China was to tell Xi Jinping and Li Keqiang that Abe is here to stay. And the way to do that is to win elections overwhelmingly. And I think he won 6 or 7 elections. But each time he would strengthen his positioning, and then the Chinese would have no option but to deal with Abe. So that was his first stance. The second stance was never to allow China and Russia to collaborate. So he wanted to avoid a three-front crisis with China, with Korea, and Russia. So he reached out to Russia very strategically. So those two were the very strategic visions of Shinzo Abe. And then came the alliance with the US to complement these two pillars of his strategy. The Kishida government was very different in that by embracing America, it had to condemn Russia immediately after the Ukraine war, which the Americans loved, and that really strengthened the US-Japan relationship. But that immediately burnt bridges with Russia, and Russia and China have since formed much closer ties. So, to Kishida's credit, he compensated that by reaching out to South Korea and strengthening relations with South Korea, which Abe could not do for personal historic views. So Kishida can be commended for the South Korea part, but in terms of strategy, I think they have very different views, and just embracing America, I don't know if that really strengthens Japan's standing, and more importantly, Kishida and Ishiba have not enjoyed the domestic political strength that Abe had. So any engagement with China wouldn't be as powerful as Abe had. And if Takaichi, the conservative lady who's very popular, comes into power, I think he might be able to establish a very strong footing and deal with China in the way that Abe did.
Mm-hmm. So I understand. That was also my take from past when I remember his terms. Abe was more multifaceted in his foreign policy approach, especially in China relations, secluding China out of the this geopolitics, but on the other hand had very, very strong and deep relations with many other nations, be it Russia or But yeah, now the administration is more understood going online, but actually the United States policy is or the same direction. So maybe that was my question. Is that not a mistake to jeopardize maybe relations with other countries, or how this is understood in Japanese population especially?
Yeah, so when the new American president is elected, and if Ishiba survives this upcoming October 27 election, if the two sit down, I think the most important thing they have to discuss is what to do with the emerging collaboration of the axis of upheaval or axis of evil. There are many names, but China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, they have different philosophies, different strategies. They're not really allies. They don't fight for each other. But there has to be a objective, honest, blunt discussion looking at what has happened there. So my friend Brenda Schaefer of Naval Postgraduate School has told seminars that in the post-World War II era, there were no challenges to America. China alone could not challenge America because it was dependent on the import of oil, and it had no energy of its own. Russia and Iran could not challenge America because they were so vulnerable to sanctions. But what is happening through this axis is that China has access to Russian and Iranian oil. And because Russia and Iran have been sanctioned, China can get it for a discount. And then Russia and Iran don't have to worry about sanctions because they have access to the huge Chinese market. And because Russia and China are on the UN, they don't have to fear the UN because they can veto anytime. So this is a new strengthening of positions of those four countries, even if they're not a formal alliance. In that scenario, how does the US and Japan compete with that and strengthen? There has to be a blunt discussion about these sanctions on Russia. I'm not quite sure, but the Hungarian foreign minister, when he was speaking in Tokyo the other day, he said that, have you looked at the amount of oil going from Russia to India? And have you seen the amount of oil going from India to Europe? India's exports of oil has increased 93% or something, meaning that Russia's being sanctioned, but they're still selling the same amount of oil. Iran is selling that oil to Europe, and Europe is using Russian oil. Nothing has changed. So very superficial sanctions, just because they feel good, are really not going to work. So there has to be a much more strategic view to the end game. And if you bring it back to the Taiwan Strait, the US and Japan have to decide what is the end game. What do they want to avoid? Do they want to avoid war? Do they want to avoid China from taking Taiwan by force? If that's the goal, then there should be ways to working towards that. Because if you think of Xi Jinping, why does he want Taiwan? He wants Taiwan for many reasons, but one of the reasons is that he wants to make sure that he has a fourth term, so that he can feel safe. He can be leader for life. And if he approaches 2027 at this rate, with the economy very bad, he doesn't have much to show for. So that could be a very dangerous time. He might make a reach to get some kind of achievement, and that might be Taiwan. If that's the case, what else could the US and Japan offer China that would satisfy his needs, his domestic needs? And for that you have to really listen carefully to what China is saying. And China, for the past 6 months, has been saying, we want to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. And the US has been like, no, you don't. You're not. You're offering dual-use parts to Russia. How could you offer to mediate? And that's very true. But and Zelensky in the UN criticized China and Brazil by by name for trying to get the Nobel Peace Prize and using Ukraine as a platform to bolster their standing. So that option has now probably gone out the window. But there must be other things that Xi Jinping is trying to do. Maybe it's strengthening his economy so that he is in a better position. That's not bad for America, helping China's economy or real estate market get a bit better. If the end game is to avoid a Taiwan war, then there should be ways to do that. I mean, just blindly decoupling from China, I don't think it's the wisest strategy to take.
Thank you. Especially one thing is always in my mind. Most probably many followers also are interested in that, and it would be great if you have a take on it, or what is your personal opinion, especially when you explain what is happening in that area with Taiwan and the whole tension in the South China Sea. And you gave the example of Japan, and exactly that was also in my mind, or other alliances like the Australia, or especially in the last time, there is a huge investment and positive politics with India, which is my actually field. I'm working for many years about Indian geopolitics. But when I'm speaking with analysts or bureaucrats in that area, mostly their opinion is, yes, it is a problem. A rising China is a problem for everyone from an economic perspective or military perspective. But when you speak one-on-one, they all of them say, but when the thought of the United States is that in a potential Taiwan, United States or China war, that we are, fighting for the United States, then they are very wrong. That's always what I'm hearing from people. Yes, there is a connection. They want to work together to maybe minimize the risk of China, but nobody wants, like it was during the Cold War era, where it was very clear cut, everyone had its side, and if needed, maybe going for war for each other. I see these times are over. So when you look back to the United States administrations or the intelligentsia, or what do they really think with these alliances when the time comes? I hope not. And this hot conflict, turns into maybe a war, that the Japanese or the Indians or other alliances in that region will really join the United States, because that would be too optimistic, I think. What do you think about
that? I attended this morning a long session at CSIS about the history of the US-Japan alliance, going back decades. The people who were involved, the ambassadors and the diplomats, bureaucrats who were in this alliance, and they were talking about the many instances when the alliance was almost tested, when North Korea flew missiles over Japan. There was a possibility. Ambassador Thomas Schiefer, former ambassador to Japan, was saying that there was a possibility that the ICBMs could land in Japan. And the US was ready to take military action against North Korea. That's not very much known, but that was the feeling. Whether the alliance will kick in is very much fluid, but I think the task is to make sure that both sides want to be side by side in contingencies. Right now, there is no alliance commitment for Japan to fight side by side with America. America has vowed to defend Japan if Japan is attacked. John Bolton has suggested that if Trump comes back, he would want to rewrite the US-Japan Security Alliance to make clear that Japan will fight side by side with America. And if that debate happens, I think Japan will say yes, because there's no other option. The alternative is to have your own nuclear weapons or team with China, and both are not really realistic. But the current way that the Pentagon is approaching this is not to sit down at a table and ask Japanese bureaucrats, will you fight with us? That's not the way this is happening. What they're doing is to integrate the alliance, first from the defense industries, so that right now, Kurt Campbell last week this week went to Japan and South Korea to talk about defense co-production. They're trying to make air-to-air missiles that the F-16s can carry in Japan, because like we discussed earlier, the American factories are totally full, and America is facing a chronic shortage due to the wars in Ukraine and Israel. And but if they do that, there might be a situation where the American government uses taxpayer money to invest in the Japanese factory, so that the Japanese factory, Mitsubishi Electric in this case, can expand its lines and produce missiles for America. That would be integration. And if that happens, probably in terms of psychological, from a psychological standpoint, Japan would very much feel that it is integrated with US. But just practically speaking, if a war happens, China will target those factories. So if China attacks Japanese soil, that would immediately trigger, it would allow constitutionally for Japan to take part in the fight. So either way, this integration of defense industries and integration of alliances is slowly and quietly moving to that direction.
Mm-hmm. So even when the possibility, for example, is low that they engage directly, China, but for the only the possibility that one day these war engagements just takes all the area, that they are prepared. I understand. So it's not exactly that that they expect Japanese or someone else is going with them, but for that day, even when the lowest risk comes, that they are prepared. So that was actually also in my mind, because when it's only about the Taiwan issue, of course nobody would risk them, but nobody knows how China will react, and if the entire region will be maybe under fire when such a war starts with the United States. And of course, when Japan is attacked, they will also defend themselves, and including with the United States. So, of course, the time is restricted. So I want to go a bit more back to.
Can I just add to that though? Japan's current foreign policy is based on defending the rules-based international order and a free and open Indo-Pacific. And if that's the case, if there is a situation where China invades Taiwan, and it's a flagrant violation of the rules-based international order, Japan has no option but to defend and fight against that, because there is no scenario where Japan says, maybe I don't want to take part in this fight. Like Japan, the consequences would not just be the US-Japan alliance being weaker, but Japan won't be trusted. So already we are in a situation where Japan has to take part in a scenario to defend the rules-based international order.
Okay, thank you. So there would be no other option, you say. I understand.
Yeah.
So,
but also one more thing. But
yeah,
there has to be domestic preparation for this. Japan's new Prime Minister Ishiba is talking about an Asian NATO, and that would entail Japanese SDF, Self-Defense Force members flying overseas to defend the Philippines or the Singapore from an invasion. But the legal preparation is not done, because the Self-Defense Force is not technically an army. Japan, by constitution, does not have an army, an air force, or a navy. It's just a self-defense force, meaning that if these self-defense force members are captured overseas, they do not enjoy the international laws that protect captives, of military captives. If it's a military, they are protected, but they will not be safe. So that would be very irresponsible for the Japanese Prime Minister to push ahead or even talk about Asian NATO before changing the constitution first and acknowledging that the self-defense force is a military.
So there need to be maybe in near future also changes on that to be prepared for that risky war or day when it's needed. I understand. Ken, especially I will also, when I have you here, the time is also restricted. So I want to ask the Middle East policy when we go out a bit from Asia Pacific. The Palestine conflict is going on, and it seems that the Israeli operations will continue for a while. And of course, from the United States perspective, we know for many, many decades, Israel in that sense, especially in the Middle East policy, is very important for all the administrations, be it Democratic and Republicans. Maybe their approaches are differing from each other, but the support is almost the same. But when you read the approach of the Biden administration, and maybe later when a Trump administration comes, because he is saying he wants to solve it quick. I don't know what he means with quick in that sense, if that's a positive approach or negative. But when you look from the Middle East, especially, also how we look in Turkey, there is a growing mistrust. Of course, everyone knows that the United States is a very close ally to Israel. But in past, I remember like the Camp David, times, and of course it was interrupted with the assassination of Isaac Rabin, etc. But there was also some balance act of the United States to push also on the same time the Palestine statehood. But in the last time, especially after the 7th October, what happened, the attack of Hamas against Israel, the whole perspective changed in the United States, and just pushing, the support on one side, or is there any view left in the USA who says, okay, it's going out of control and this can be destabilize the entire Middle East, and we need to stop it anywhere, or tell Israel, okay, you fought now your war, but here is the red line, don't go farther. How you read it? How the United States, especially the administration right now and the bureaucracy, looks at it? Because Middle East is a very dangerous place. Sometimes it can get out of control very easily, and very easily other nations can involve into this war. How the United States will solve this issue? How do you see it?
So first of all, the Middle East is super important for Japan and South Korea and Australia, because although the Biden administration has said China is the pacing threat and the Indo-Pacific is the primary theater for the US military going forward and for economic activity, it is the center of economic activity, we Asian nations have to be clear-eyed about what the American public is most interested in. And you can just take the New York Times from today and count how many stories there are on the Middle East and how many there are on Japan. 100-0. I talked to a former Trump administration official. She was saying, there's 3 wars. There's Ukraine, there's Israel, there's Taiwan. But both Ukraine and Taiwan have rich neighbors. Ukraine has European neighbors. Taiwan has Japan and South Korea. Those rich neighbors can take care of those wars. Israel has no neighbors. And so naturally, America has to help Israel first and foremost. And that is the general feeling of the American people. American people know 20 people who have relatives in Israel or are Jewish. They very, very rarely have any Ukrainian friends or Japanese friends. So that's the reality, first of all. And then that's why we have to watch what's going to happen in the Middle East. And whatever the US administration wants or thinks is becoming less and less relevant. It's becoming irrelevant because Israel is going down its own path. And So just a year ago, October 7th happened, and the initial analysis was that, Iran and Hamas are trying to derail Israel's rush to sign a peace deal with Saudi Arabia. And in the very short term, very initial stages, Hamas actually did succeed in derailing those talks. But a year on, if we look at what is happening, is that, yes, Israel is no longer pursuing actively a peace deal with Saudi Arabia, but what it is actively thinking of is decapitating the Iranian regime, getting rid of the Islamic leaders of Iran, and signing a peace deal with the people of Iran. So 2 or 3 weeks ago, Netanyahu had a video message to the people of Iran saying that the Persian people and the Jewish people have had thousands of years of friendship. And once we get over this hump, Iran could immediately have prosperity and have peace. So that's the future that we're looking at. And that, I think, is also a reflection, which is not really discussed much, but an understanding among the Israeli people that the two-state solution that the US is pursuing is just not acceptable for the Israeli people anymore after October 7th. So if that's the case, if the Americans push down the two-state solution down the Israeli throat, that becomes an existential crisis for them. So they're naturally looking for alternative partners and I think they're trying to take matters into their own hands, eliminate Hezbollah, eliminate Hamas, eliminate the Iranian regime, and sign peace with Iran, and then also sign peace, deepen collaboration with India. I think it's the three I's: Israel, Iran, and India, that is going to be the basis of Israel's security, and not too dependent on America, because I think the Israelis feel that listening too much to the Americans will not lead to peace. And going back to your references of the Oslo and the peace negotiations, if you look at the history of the Israeli-Palestinian negotiations, there has never been a successful case where a negotiated peace was achieved. The Oslo Accords they agreed to, but it really hasn't. A Palestinian state hasn't taken shape. There was a roadmap. That didn't work. So it has never worked. This both sides compromising a little bit to search for a middle ground. It has never worked. What has moved in the Middle East is unilateral decisions by Israel. The 2005 disengagement from Gaza by Sharon, which is very unpopular in Israel today, but I think that was a very wise move. It is unilateral, but it's not taking all. It giving, like, leaving Gaza and putting the ball in the Palestinian court, so it had the international backing on Israel's side. The 2020 Abraham Accords was also unilateral. This is different from the Gaza disengagement because it was just take. It wasn't giving Palestinians hope or responsibility. So it was a quick fix, but it backfired, definitely, because of in the shape of October 7th. So there are no free lunches in the Middle East. So there has to be some kind of a concession, but it doesn't have to be a negotiated concession. Here, Israel can be wise and craft a way where they win the international backing. And I think that's the kind of way forward, going forward.
And regarding, again, the Israeli-Palestine conflict and the Israeli operations, which is continuing, there is much emphasis on the Israeli side that they believe, especially what happened in the last months, to engage Iran directly. They pushing that and they wish that. Do you think that any administration, any near administration, be it the Harris when they win or Trump, will greenlight such a large operation against Iran, or it will be such just limited, like in past, to maybe hit targets in Syria and Iraq, I mean, the militias of Iran, or will be a directly hit against the regime, because these are two very different decisions, and the danger level is also very different, because United States is engaging right now in Ukraine differently, in Taiwan differently. This would open a very huge fire inside of Middle East. Is the United States interested in that? Any administration, any future administration?
So there are three big options for Israel's retaliation against Iran. They could go after the nuclear facilities, they can go after the oil facilities, or they can go after the regime. And the Biden administration has been clear they don't want to go after the nuclear, and they don't want Israel to go after the oil. They haven't said anything about the regime change. And in the Biden Netanyahu phone call, the readout didn't mention Iran. So I'm sure there are lots of discussions going on there. But whether the Americans would tolerate it, it's shifting. The situation is shifting. Just 6 months ago, when I would talk to neoconservatives in Washington, pro-Israel people, they were suggesting that maybe we go after the oil facilities in Iran and make the Iranian economy collapse so much that there will be unhappiness towards the regime, and then maybe we can hope that there will be an uprising. But when they talked about it, they weren't very confident. I think today they're much more confident in their situation. And following what Netanyahu said in the video conference, I can't see a situation where he would take out Iranian oil facilities and crippling Iran's economy and making the people of Iran suffer. I think the neocons here are much more confident that if they take out the leadership, then good things will follow without having to cripple Iran's economy. So to answer your question, I think the situation on the ground will impact the choices Israel makes, and that's shifting all the time. And this killing of Sinwar in Gaza is also another factor that might change its calculations.
So
just going back on Turkey, though.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So if Israel's strategy is to team with Iran and India, I want to ask you, but it'll be very interesting in what Turkey decides, because Turkey has a centuries-old rivalry with Iran. Does Erdogan, that's the Turkish leadership, think it would be wise to team with those? Right?
The relation of Turkey in general, Ken, is like the relations with Russia. It is a, how I should describe, like a love-hate relation, because the geography pushes you for these relations over many centuries. There are the question of energy dependency, and there are, especially on both sides, a large size of Turkic population living in these countries, be it in Caucasia and inside of Russia, or be it on Iranian side. So that's why, yes, there are also, over the support in Syria, there are also differences. Turkey supported other groups, and Iran was on the Assad side, and still like that, and it's still not solved. But Turkey is engaging for a long time with the Russians and Iranians. Like, we put our disagreements on side and going, in subjects where we understand each other. So that was a balance act. But of course, if the United States foreign policy in that region, also the Israeli view, is about to really hit Iran hard with the regime change, it's also for me a question mark, because the Turkish foreign policy gives not any sign to understand right now, whether inside or outside, how they will react. because I can understand that there is also this anxiety for many decades and centuries with Iran. We have the longest standing, border with Iran. With other countries, it's newer actually, and the reason for that is at one point the Ottomans and the Safavids and later the other empires decided no, there is no winner in it. And it's a very dangerous issue that these both countries are, fighting, and they agreed on these borders. So Turkey knows very well, yes, there are problems with Iran, but what will happen after the regime is, changed? Because we have seen what happened in Iraq. We know the mess in Afghanistan, and we know the mess in Syria, where actually the American indecisiveness after the rise of ISIS, what happened, and Assad is still there. So it is easy to maybe remove the regime, but there are the Kurds issue, there are the Turkic issue in Iran, there are different mindsets, there are also still communists or different thinking. There are, supporters of the Shah regime, they are haters of the Shah regime. At the same time, they hate this regime right now. So what to do with these 80 million people? And if you think about that, Turkey has more than 10 million right now, immigration, illegal immigration, or also, the refugee issue. Of course, they are very careful in a hot engagement. And I don't think that they would be very positive in a direct engagement of the United States with Iran. But when there is no other possibility, we must wait. I don't think they have still decided yet this, the question for that. But I think the regime change would be very dangerous. If there is any revenge act or any response, I think it would be better that it's limited on some infrastructure, because we never know when some fire going out of the Middle East, sometimes you cannot stop it. It reaches other nations. And that would be also dangerous for the United States foreign policy in general, because it has to engage in Ukraine, in Taiwan. There are so many issues. So I don't think that the Americans are interested either, because they have also the mindset to bring peace here and go towards China, So if you hit Iran, I think the wars will start from very beginning. And I don't think that anyone in Ankara sees that right now positive. That would be my take on that. But my question back to
it's
you.
Interesting because, but the US,
the Turkey.
Sorry,
yes.
what's that? Sorry.
Yeah, my question back to you. You're following the American foreign policy closely. How the Americans are thinking right now about the Turkey's position? That's also a problem. Because, we have still this alliance inside of NATO. We're working on some subjects. We are very good in Africa. But when we come back to Middle East, we have many differences, as you know, with the United States. This administration, also the previous administration, beginning with the Russia relation, the S-400 issue, and the view towards Israel. What is the view right now in Washington? Do you think we will freeze all of them and we will be good again? Or this view against, towards Turkey will continue?
Yeah, I think Erdogan is a brilliant politician, and he has this many options of sometimes being an Islamic country, like not an Islamic country, but ties with the Islamic world, part of the Middle East, relations with Africa. I have a map here, so I'm looking at the map. Part of the Africa. Part of the Black Sea community, a leader of the Central Asia country, and partnership with Russia. It could go either way. That's Turkey's strength. But I think the one weakness that Erdogan has never learned from is that he thinks that he can be the leader of the Islamic world. I used to live in Cairo, and I know, but the Egyptians don't see Turkey as the leader of the Islamic world.
Mm-hmm.
And his support for the Palestinian cause clouds his view and his strategic thinking, I think. And his stance since October 7th has definitely weakened his standing in Washington, and he's just seen as very extreme. And his talking points just don't resonate in this town. That's the reality. But if he sees new realities so it'll be really interesting to see how Erdogan reacts to Israel as it goes forward, because clearly Israel is on a roll now, and how Turkey aligns itself with that would be very interesting to see. Iran, many people are from Azerbaijani backgrounds, so Turkey and Azerbaijan's alliance was that one nation, two armies. The brotherhood between Azerbaijan and Turkey could enable Turkey to have influence in the new Middle East through Iran. They might decide to, because I think America will side with Saudi Arabia in this new future. And then Turkey has the option of siding with America and Saudi Arabia, or siding with Israel and Iran. I have no idea which they will go, but I believe that Turkey will make the right decision, because it's such a powerful country and strategically located, and it is the key swing state of the Middle East.
Yes, exactly.
And Japan
that's a good definition. Yeah, swing states. Yeah. But it has also to do, of course, with geography, being close to all of these areas. You cannot do without Turkey. That's also the reality. We must wait, but I don't think, especially the Turkish-Israeli relations deteriorated so much. It's not easy to repair them when these operations are going on, because this is also popular. The view of the population is also very important, as you know, in internal politics. But I think, I hope that anyhow in Middle East, this situation is solved in a friendly basis, also, with the United States. I hope the new administration gives more hope. And I think if there are coming positive signals after the elections from Washington, I think Ankara will also orientate itself more positive towards these solutions. I think so. Well, Ken, we are already over the 1 hour. I thank you very much. We tried to cover many of the subjects. Like always, you teach us so many important, informations about the Asia-Pacific issues and geopolitics in general. It's always great to hear and listen you, and you read your articles. And to my followers, I really highly suggest to read the articles of Ken. He has very great insights. Thank you very much, Ken, joining my program. It was a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aaron. It was great to talk to you again.
Thank you. And don't forget to follow HRA Geopolitics, friends. Thank you for listening. And I hope to see you again in another YouTube program from me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.